Hello and welcome back to my RC channel. I'm AndyRC and today I'm going to be taking a look at the Eachine Cinecan. So I guess the name is a derivative of the original trash can, especially going by its looks. And you know what? It's actually pretty good. I'm trying to think of the last time that I said that about an Eachine product. The price is competitive as well. I'll link to it in the description of the video so that you can take a look, because prices change all the time and I get the comments saying, "Oh, it's only such and such, you got the price wrong," or "It's $100 more than you said." Now, the main reason these models are more expensive is because the Cadex Tarsier camera, which on its own cost $90. Ah, man, I've done it. I've mentioned the price of something. Anyways, so this isn't going to be a review of the Tarsier camera. I'll invite you to watch the GEP-RC CinePro 4K review, which goes into probably too much detail. But to summarise, it's two cameras built into one unit. The top one is for recording HD footage on board up to 4K, and the bottom one is a normal FPV camera. I think the idea is absolutely genius because cameras using one sensor, such as the Runcam Split and the Cadex Turtle, have a terrible FPV feed, and usually that is coupled with a load of noise as well as added latency, whereas here we basically have a Cadex Rittal FPV camera underneath. Cadex can't win though, because on my review of the CinePro 4K, filmmakers complained that the field of view was too wide, creating a fisheye effect, and FPVers say that the field of view is too narrow, and that's because its HD sensor has a 4:3 aspect ratio. Therefore, it has to crop the top and the bottom off to record in 16:9, so you lose the vertical field of view. And as for filmmakers, come on guys, correct lens distortion in post, or if you're lazy, then its app has got LDC built into it. Anyways, I think everyone is missing a trick with this camera, and it's not your fault because sadly there's a company out there that has a patent on this trick. But for FPVs, the 4K or any 16:9 option is the reason most people think the field of view sucks. The fact that this camera records in 4K isn't the best thing about it. First of all, it only does it in 30 frames per second, and I'm a 60 frames per second guy, and YouTube butchers 4K footage anyways. For me, the Tarsier's marvel is its 1440p 60 fps 4:3 option, which uses the most area of the sensor compared to any of the other settings. And then you can add dynamic stretching in post-production to get a respectful wide field of view HD recording. Now, I've thought long and hard about this, and I think I'm going to have another crack at some point showing you how to do dynamic stretching of 4:3 video, because my method is so easy, it can be done within a few clicks and for free. There is imitation software out there, but they aren't completely the real deal, whereas mine is, and I got a YouTube strike the last time that I did it, so I'm going to try and approach it in a different way. But just so we are clear, all of the HD footage in this video is shot in 1440p and dynamically stretched to 16:9, because for me it's that what makes this camera special. And the 4K option, it's nice to have and it can be used in some situations, but not for us FPVers. I've heard people say, "Oh, they should have improved the Turtle before the Tarsier." Well, they have, and the Tarsier is it. Anyways, back to the Cinecan. So, it's an 85mm Cinewhoop. The protectors and canopy are the same style as the Mobula 7, but of course the Mobula 7 is smaller. The motors are an Eachine branded 1103 7000 kV naked bottom motor, and it's here where I think Eachine has got the motor choice right compared to the Betafpv 85X 4K, which was borderline unflyable outside. And this might confuse some people because it contradicts things that I've said on other models, but bear with me on this. So the 85X 4K from Betafpv also uses the Tarsier camera, and maybe they saw how good the AndyRC Cine Pro 4K flew and gave it the same spec 1105 5000 kV motors, making it a 4S model. But this turned out to be a huge mistake because it didn't fly well at all. As I mentioned in my 85X 4K review, the Cine Pro 4K has all of its components on the same level. So along with a top-mounted battery, it flies like it's on rails because it has a great balance. But the mistake Betafpv made is they bottom-mounted the battery to try and make the model lighter, and they did this, I believe, because with their 85X HD version, which uses the Cadex Turtle and not the Tarsier, also flew terrible. Now, if you are not familiar with Cinewhoops, then a lot of them have a flying characteristic known as yaw washout, where you would do a roll or a split S in acro mode, and on the recovery the model would yaw or snap backwards by itself. And Betafpv's 85X HD did this for loads of reasons. First of all, the PIDs were too high, so the recommended 4S Lipos were overheating the ESCs, causing them to go up in flames. They made a statement about how there was a manufacturing defect, but at the same time it was discovered that the ESCs couldn't handle 4S, so they relegated it to a 3S model, and 3S didn't give it enough power to push through the weight imbalance of a heavy camera and VTX at the top of the model, along with a heavy underpowered Lipo underneath. Now, my friend NJ Tech, who sadly for the FPV community is off doing his day job being a rock star and hasn't been that active recently, figured out that if you reduce the PIDs drastically on the 85X HD and use a lightweight 4S Lipo, then the ESCs wouldn't go up in smoke, and there was enough power to break through all of these barriers, and you didn't get the yaw washout. And I think Betafpv used this philosophy on their 4K model, forgetting that the Cadex Tarsier camera makes the model weigh significantly more than their 85X HD edition, which uses the Cadex Turtle. So even on a 4S with the same spec as the AndyRC Cine Pro 4K and it being lighter, 4S now wasn't enough power for the extra weight and other barriers which caused the model to fly badly. So the 85X 4K's dry weight is 90 grams, the Cinecan is 64 grams, and with the same 2-inch Emax blade, that is a significant weight difference, and you'll see why when I get onto the Cinecan's Lipo. So how have they made it that much lighter? Well, I've already mentioned the first one. The motors are an 1103 stator against an 1105, and with one in each corner, you would be surprised how much weight that adds. Secondly, and I'm going to have to word this in a way that doesn't send people hammering the keyboards, it's using the new Eachine branded V3 Pro Crazybee all-in-one flight controller. And it's important to word it in that way because the Crazybee boards have, in my opinion, a unjustified bad reputation. You see, the previous versions were being pushed beyond the limits of what they were originally designed for, which is basically a 1S tiny whoop. So the Eachine V3 no longer has 5 amp ESCs, it has 10 amp continuous rated ESCs, and that's per ESC resulting in a continuous current draw of 40 amps with a 12 amp burst for 5 seconds, giving a 48 amp 5-second burst, which is now actually overkill for this model, but overkill is better than underkill. You can actually buy the V3 board on its own if you want to upgrade any of your models that are pushing the limits with the V2 boards, so I'll link to that in the description. Oh, and did I mention it can also take up to a 4S this time? You'll also notice no capacitor on the XT30 connector, which was a patch for the V2 boards to stop the current surges from the XT30 blowing the 5-volt regulator, so that's been fixed as well. So onto the battery, and it comes with a 3S 300 mAh Lipo, which I said was the wrong choice for the Mobula 7 HD, which I stand by because it's too heavy for its 40mm props. However, with the 2-inch blade, 3S is more suited. The Lipo's only rated from 30 to 60C, and I'd say those figures probably aren't correct either, because it sags below a stable voltage on a heavy punch out. However, it recovers fast, and a higher C-rated Lipo of the same capacity would mean more weight and probably wouldn't fit in the Lipo holder either. So I think this Lipo is the best option for outdoors, and a GMB 450 mAh 2S fits in the holder for flying indoors. The flight time outdoors is about 3 minutes, and that's giving it death, which is fine by me. And depending on what Lipo you use indoors, you could get a longer flight time taking it slower.
starlight. It's our lives in hindsight. And as I lay here in the street, I see what I need.
The model weighs 90 grams, including its LiPo, which is the weight of the 85X 4K without its LiPo, so that really puts the weight difference in perspective. Now, unfortunately, the receiver is still SPI based, and this is the FrSky version, and it also comes in a FlySky 2A protocol version. However, they offer a Crossfire version which uses a proper Crossfire RX, and they also do a no RX version, and this is probably the one to go for because the built-in SPI receivers are only good for about 120 meters of range. I think they have actually improved it over the V2 board, which got around about 80 to 100 meters. You can see the little piddly antenna coming out of the underneath, which at certain angles gets blocked by the LiPo and can give you fail-safe warnings from about 50 feet away. And another good reason for getting the no RX or Crossfire version is that the VTX switches from 25 milliwatt up to 200 milliwatt via smart audio, which will be wasted with the range of an SPI receiver. The VTX has a button on the side which you can just about reach to also change the settings. However, I just use smart audio to change the channel and the power because it's much more convenient through the on-screen display. It's using a micro UFL connector, but I think they have used some kind of adhesive because I couldn't get it to move at all, which is a good thing. The antenna is a linear sleeve dipole, which I have actually modified. It was originally cable tied to the back, poking out, which would easily get caught in the props, so I've rerouted it through the canopy using a cable tie and some heat shrink. The antenna is really long, so its active element is now nice and high, so the reception should be much better as well. Another thing that they have done to get the weight down is use a thin material for the canopy. However, it's a catch-22 situation because there is more chance of it flexing or carrying vibrations from the motors. So depending on the amount of light entering the camera, the flimsy canopy housing the camera can produce giallo in the image. They have addressed this by providing the ND8 filter by Cadex. Now, I made a video on why ND filters reduce giallo, so I'll add it as a card at the top for you to go and check out. However, ND filters can be a bit of a pain, especially if you live in a country where the sun goes in and out every 20 seconds. If the skies are blue and the sun is out, then you want the ND filter on all of the time. But when a cloud comes over, you can compare it to wearing sunglasses indoors. It can make the image darker and less defined when it comes to sharpness. Now, I have performed flights on a sunny day with the ND filter on and off, which you will see later. There are a couple of other nice touches. For example, the way they have mounted the Tarsier camera gives good access to the micro SD card slot, as well as the two buttons to control it. There's quite a lot of tilt options for the camera, which is hard to do with this kind of canopy. The Wi-Fi antenna has been uniquely mounted at the front, so it doesn't get in the way of anything. There are actually only a couple of negatives with this model, which again is surprising for Eachine. The bind and bootloader buttons aren't accessible, so you will have to use the CLI bind command in Betaflight, which is an easy one to get around. But taking it apart to get to the bootloader button looks like it could be a pain. And if you want to use your own receiver, then the pads are on the other side as well. I also wish they could have found a way to have the receiver's antenna lift up vertically outside the canopy. This did wonders on the Eachine Red Devil in terms of range with the SPI receiver. It's come flash with Betaflight version 4.04. It wasn't set up terribly, but I changed quite a few things to my liking. Motor stop was turned on, and my preference is to have it switched off so that the model doesn't fall out of the sky at the bottom of the throttle. This would happen because air mode was also turned off, so I switched that on. D-Shot commands were both turned off, so I added those for a beacon because this model doesn't have a physical buzzer, so it's better than nothing. For the power and battery, I just changed the maximum voltage to 4.5 volts per cell because the supplied Lipo is a high volt, and even though I don't charge it to a high volt, if you wanted to do that, then the setting is set to 4.3 as stock, whereas a fully charged high volt is 4.35, so it sometimes won't arm if you don't change that to a higher figure, because when you charge these Lipos, they don't always sit at the voltage, and sometimes the scaling is wrong as well. I didn't touch anything at all in the PIDs tab. They are custom PIDs for once, as are the rates. In the receiver tab, I added 5 for deadband to stop any trim drift from my transmitter, and in the modes tab, oddly, angle mode wasn't set up, only acro and horizon mode was set up. So I've added that because for me angle mode is a must for flying in tight spaces indoors. And a lost model alarm wasn't set up either, so I added that as well. And I've added flip over after crash for when I'm flying at the indoor sports hall that I'm a member of. But if flying over grass, I wouldn't recommend using it, because if a prop gets stuck in some grass and you try to flip it over, that can put resistance on the ESC and cause the ESC to smoke. As for the on-screen display, I removed the crosshairs as well as the disarmed icon, and I replaced that with the VTX channel, which is important to me because I fly with other people. I removed the max speed from the end screen as there is no GPS either. The model comes in a nice pouch, so it's perfect for just throwing in your bag to go flying. You get a spare set of props along with an Allen key, a small screwdriver and some spare screws for the canopy as well as the props. You are given a spare Tarsier ribbon cable along with the Tarsier instruction manual and a Lipo strap if you want to use a bigger or higher C Lipo that won't fit in the plastic holder. You would have to cut off the plastic holder though in order to do that. Then we have the on-screen display controller board to change the settings of the bottom FPV camera. They have actually left access to the JST connector at the back of the model rather than leaving the extension cable plugged in. This is a wise move in my opinion, as it runs too close to the props. And lastly, there is a manual with a lot of useful information, but as I say, with all models that come with Betaflight, you need to be accustomed to Betaflight, otherwise you will struggle to get it flying. So this flight was done outdoors without the ND filter installed, and the sun's coming in and out here, and there's not that much jello. However, there is a little bit, so you will need to use the ND filter. Now, unfortunately, the weather has been absolutely shocking. I'm flying in 15 mile/hour winds here, so I couldn't get it to fly smoothly, but I don't think that is the copter's fault. Now, look at this punch out. Did you see how much the voltage sagged on the Lipo? And I think that's down to the C rating. It does recover quickly, though, I will give it that. And I'm throwing every maneuver at it that I can think of, and it is not tricking out. And that is why this model impressed me so much. Look at that, an inverted yaw spin. You cannot do that with the Betafpv 85X 4K. Now, here I'm trying to do a bit of a range test. Those trees at the back there, they are about 120 meters. It gets into the 30s for the RSSI, and I turn around. I do think they have improved the range slightly, but I would still go for a external receiver, I think. But yeah, just flying around here, and even though it's very windy and getting pushed around, it's nimble. I can fly through the trees, but I hate to say this, and you're gonna hate hearing it, these were the same conditions that I flew the AndyRC Cine Pro 4K in, and it was a lot smoother. And despite me not being able to trick it out, I think that the AndyRC's F7 dual IMU system is just better and smoother. So even though this one is smaller and has its applications for sure, and it's a lot cheaper, I should say, I still go for the AndyRC. Anyways, yeah, I'm giving it absolute death in this flight, and you can see that the voltage is reading 10 volts, so we want to be coming in for a landing. And also the current meter is way out as well, as you will see. I think it reads like 190 milliamps. That flight was pretty short as well, at about 2 minutes 30, but as I say, I was giving it absolute death. Well, this time we have got the ND filter on, and as you can see, the jello is reduced. Unfortunately, the model shaking isn't reduced, but check this out for the range. I'm going about, that's 120 meters there, and it's just dropping into the 30s. So again, just to reiterate what I said earlier, I think they have improved the range of the SPI receiver. But yes, the problem that I'm having with the ND filter is the sun's coming in and out, and as I mentioned earlier, that when the sun goes in, then it's like you're wearing sunglasses inside. But did you see there, I pointed the model straight at the sun and did full throttle, and it didn't get any jello. So with this model, you're going to have to keep the ND filter on all of the time, and then just put up with it when the sun goes in. But yeah, nice tree dive there. And this flight was a little bit longer because I wasn't giving it as much throttle, and I think I got a 3-minute flight time out of this. You can see I can get through all of the gaps that I usually go through when I do my freestyle on this field and dive in this tree again. You can probably see the leaves on the trees on how windy it is. It'd be interesting to fly this guy on a really calm day. Now, there's some video noise feeding through from the electrical system, so ironically they should have put that capacitor on the battery terminals to filter out the noise. But I will link to it in the description if you are interested in it. And you can see that the voltage, when I give it throttle, it is going into the 9s, which, you know, will be damaging the Lipo. Just managed to get this gap here under the tree, and this is where the ND filter will really show. So I'm gonna go into these trees here. Now, the ND filter doesn't affect the FPV camera as much as it does the HD footage, but you will see that it goes really dark on the HD footage, and then with the FPV camera you can see much more detail. There's a lot of scraggle in there though, so I'm going to escape it. But yeah, we are at 2.5 minutes here, and it's sort of kind of flashing to 9 volts. So I'm just sort of taking it easy now to try and get a 3-minute flight time, and it's just coming up to that. I'm keeping it in close just in case it drops out. But again, we have got 222 milliamps reading this time, which is actually a little bit more correct. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, thanks so much for watching. Please continue to subscribe. Cheers.